Oh, thank you, everyone. I am going to be recording this session so that you will be able to have a copy afterwards. We'll send that out. But as we kick it off today, we're super excited to see you here. But we want to get a little sense of who's joining us today. So if you would go ahead and use the chat to share three quick things: your name, which we can see on the screen, but your current role and where you're joining from. And if you feel comfortable, also adding, why did you choose to join this session today? So we'll give everyone a little moment to introduce themselves before we get started. Hello, Christine. Hello, Jenny. Hello, Krista. Oregon. I've never been to Oregon, but I would really like to go. Beautiful. Awesome. Hi, Joanne. All right, and we still have a few people still joining us, so welcoming everyone in. Beautiful. All right, so I'm seeing a lot of different roles, a lot of people joining from all over. This is amazing. I think that one of the most powerful things when you're coming into a session like this is to see people and hear people's experience from different contexts. And so knowing that we're all working together to kind of support the same mission around supporting students with disabilities is really awesome. And so we are going to jump right in. All right, so just a quick reminder of our Zoom accessibility features. You'll see the chat. We've already used that a little bit. I also invite you all to use the reaction button. I love reactions. And there's also going to be a few polls throughout our session too. So these are different ways that you'll be able to engage with us. And, you know, claps, thumbs up, all of it. It helps me get a little pulse check on how things are landing. And also, if you need captions, you can turn on that live transcription button. So, who am I? My name is Rachel Burley. I am a former high school special education teacher, instructional coach, dean of students, and director of special education. And so I currently work with the Ability Challenge as a program director, and I am located in Nashville, Tennessee. And so a little bit about the Ability Challenge. We are actually a nonprofit organization that partners with schools, districts, and networks to help leaders and teachers build authentically inclusive school communities that meet the needs of all students. So we ground all of our work in the Thrive framework, which is our evidence-based roadmap for the knowledge, mindsets, and practices required of leaders and educators to create the optimal conditions for diverse learners. All right, so you can see the elements of our framework there. If you would like to learn more, we have a really great website that you can also check out. All right, so we're going to do one of my favorite things to kick us off. It's going to be a little pulse check. So in a moment, you're going to see a question on your screen. It's going to say, in one word, how would you describe SDI implementation at your school right now? So we're talking about specially designed activities. So don't write your word yet. I want you to take a moment and think and type, and then I will tell you when to press enter. All right. All right, get ready. We're gonna press enter in 3, 2, 1, go. Ooh, all right, everyone. Let's take a second and just see what's coming through. So I see a range of words, some really strong, some really positive. Improving, I love that. Inconsistent, smart, fragmented, work in progress. I love that. A lot of inconsistent. Well, I hope that this session today really supports you all in moving toward more consistent frameworks for implementing specially designed instruction. So you're at the right session, especially if you wrote the word inconsistent, which I think is the most prominent word we see in the chat right here. All right. So from our session today, you may or may not know, but this is actually our third session in our arc of webinars around specially designed instruction. And so today we're talking specifically about what are those school-wide conditions that leaders can set to support their teachers and students in implementing specially designed instruction. So our objectives are a little lofty today, but they are as follows. Participants will understand how strong specially designed instruction emerges from school-wide systems. They'll be able to identify 4 school-wide conditions that support SDI, examine leadership decisions that influence instructional quality and consistency, and identify opportunities to strengthen SDI in your own schools. So bringing it back home to you. All right, so just to refresh ourselves, when we talk about specially designed instruction or SDI, which you'll hear me call it throughout our session, we are talking about the IDEA definition that tells us exactly what we mean by specially designed instruction. So SDI is defined in the Individuals with Disability Education Act as adapting as appropriate to the needs of an eligible child under this part, the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction to one, address the needs of the child that result from the child's disability, and to ensure access of the child in the general curriculum. All right, so to put that in plain terms, it's how a teacher adapts the what, the how they teach to address the specific challenges a student faces due to their disability. All right, and so the purpose of SEI is to ensure that students with disabilities can access the general education curriculum and make meaningful progress. Notice what this doesn't say. It doesn't say that they feel included, not that that's not important. It doesn't say that they're present. It says access, progress, and meets standards. So our goal is not participation alone. It's also making sure that our students are learning. And so when we evaluate instruction in classrooms, we should be asking, is the student in the room or is the instruction actually designed in a way that allows them to meet the grade level and academic standards of their peers? So another little refresher here, SDI lives in one of these 3 areas. It's the content. So the content is what students are expected to learn, grade level standards, skills, academic expectations. It's through the methodology, which is the how instruction happens. So instructional approaches, strategies, techniques, and the delivery, which is the conditions under which the instruction is provided. So we're talking about the setting, the pacing, the frequency, the format. It's how instruction is structured to meet the disability-related needs of a student. So we already kind of talked about this a little bit, but I want to get a quick poll for some informal data. But I want you all to think through this question. When you think of your school or district, would you say that SDI is currently being implemented, 1, very consistently, B, somewhat consistently, or 3, it varies classroom to classroom? All right, so from our chat waterfall, I got a little sense, but let's see what the data will tell us. All right, so I've launched that poll. You should be able to see it. I will give you all a few moments to respond. Take about 10 more seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll. And these were our results. So the majority of you selected C, it varies widely classroom to classroom. So that means that it probably is happening in pockets here and there, but I think what we all want to move toward is that A, very consistently. And so hopefully some of the conditions we talk about today will help your schools move from classroom to classroom to very consistently moving forward. All right, so thank you all for engaging in that poll. So Your responses highlight something that we see across a lot of schools, which is many special educators are familiar with SDI. The real challenge is executing it consistently. All right. And so when we think about that, the next question then becomes, where is it breaking down? So why isn't it happening consistently? Is it because of time? Do we think it is because of systems, lack of clarity, staffing, competing priorities? What's the reason why? And feel free to use the chat if you have a couple thoughts about where SDI does break down for you all. Lack of clarity, competing priorities. Yep. Having a clear understanding is very important. Yep. Mm. Time management, staffing, lack of training. Yeah. All of these are very common themes that we see come up, and that's where we want to focus our time today. Overwhelmed staff. Yeah, you can see that. So yeah, I see a lot of lack of understanding. So I want to share this quote with you all that is one of my favorite quotes. It is that principals influence student achievement primarily by creating the conditions that enable teachers to teach effectively. So in 2021, the Wallace Foundation conducted a literature review around principal impact on student achievement, and it found that school leadership was second only to classroom instruction in school-related impacts on learning. So this research is super powerful because it reframes the conversation, and we can think about how we as leaders or how leaders in your buildings can influence the conditions that shape instruction. And so we know that if those conditions are weak, even strong teachers would struggle to implement SDI. So I have for you all four conditions that I want to share that will help make SDI possible. All right. So these four conditions are conditions that we consistently see in schools where specially designed instruction is working well. First, there's an understand of the student need. Then educators are able to collaborate to plan instruction. Then instruction is delivered with the right strategies. And then finally, we monitor whether the instruction is actually improving student outcomes. So what we see is when these four conditions exist, SDI becomes more likely to be implemented consistently and effectively. And so these aren't just teacher moves you can see, but they're actual systems that leaders create so teachers can actually deliver SDI. And so we're going to talk through all four. And as we go through, I want you to think about two things. Is this condition strong in my school? And what evidence would I expect to see if it were? All right. So let's start with the first condition. At the core of strong SDI systems, there's a very simple question. Are instructional decisions actually being driven by students' disability-related needs and IEP goals? All right. So in strong systems, leaders should ask questions to themselves like these. Can teachers clearly explain how a student's disability affects learning in this subject? Do instructional strategies clearly target specific barriers, not just general differentiation? So those are questions that leaders should be asking themselves when they think about this condition in their school. But then they should also be looking for evidence. So they look for evidence that teachers can clearly explain how the disability impacts learning in a specific subject, that instruction is aligned with the student IEP goals and present levels, that it identifies the learning barriers, and teachers are using aligned instructional strategies to address those barriers and known needs of students. So what leaders often discover, though, is that teachers know the accommodations in an IEP, but they haven't always translated those into instructional decisions for students or thinking through how they will adapt their instruction to meet the needs of all students. And so with that in mind, and to support this, I want to share the following tool. It's called an SDI caseload organizer. So one of the biggest challenges with SDI is that the information we need to make choices about students' needs lives in a lot of different places. You have the IEP, you have evaluations, you have assessment data from the classroom. But this organizer helps bridge the gap by giving case managers, and I use the phrase case managers, but oftentimes special education teachers, a simple way to map students' disability-related needs to the actual instructional decisions that need to be made. So I'm going to drop a copy of this in the chat. Feel free, it'll force you to make a copy actually, but feel free to make your own copy and think through if this is a tool that you could benefit from rolling out with your teachers or staff in your school. So you'll see the different sections here. It has the student name, how the student's disability affects learning or behavior in a subject area, if there are related IEP goals, and then possible content, methodology, and delivery adaptations. All right, so then this is also a tool that can be shared among grade level teams so that we're all working toward the same outcomes for students and we're aligned on what those adaptations are and what they should look like. I really like this tool and I wish I had one when I was teaching, but just to ground us more in how case managers can use this tool, thinking through those four key things, the student, the barrier, the instructional strategies, the classroom environment, and then also it can be a really great tool for case managers to use during co-planning with general education teachers. So using it as kind of like a one-stop shop when we are co-planning or going to make those instructional decisions. Instead of saying this student needs support or this student might struggle here, the case manager or special education teacher can say, the student struggles with organizing written responses. A graphic organizer will help them structure their thinking and share this one pager with them. This is also a tool that leaders can use. So during walkthroughs, leaders can ask themselves, what barrier is the student experiencing? What instructional strategy is being used to address it? So instead of just checking whether accommodations are happening, leaders can start looking at whether instructional decisions about content, methodology, and delivery are being driven by student need. All right, so feel free to make a copy of that and edit it to fit your school's needs. That's totally fine, but wanted to share that for you. All right, the second condition that we're going to talk about is collaborative planning structures. So we know that a lot of schools do implement co-planning or collaborative planning, but the question that we want to ask ourselves is, are instructional decisions consistently driven by students' disability-related learning needs and IEP goals? So even when teachers understand student needs, SEI rarely happens consistently unless there is intentional co-planning between general and special educators. So leaders should be asking questions like, how are roles defined during co-taught lessons? How does the team ensure SDI adaptations are incorporated into lesson plans? Because when this condition is strong, we see a few specific signals. So teachers are actually meeting regularly to plan instruction for students with disabilities. Co-teachers have clear instructional roles during lessons rather than one teacher, one floating, one teach, one assist is a common co-teaching structure we see. But we want our co-planning conversations to be more focused on student needs, identifying the barriers in the lesson that might be present, and how teachers are planning to respond instructionally. And so special educators are contributing to the instructional decision-making, not just compliance task or paperwork when it comes to supporting the general education classroom. So I want to give us a moment to engage in a little bit of self-reflection so you don't have to share. But as we think about collaborative planning, one of the key questions becomes, are the supports in the lesson designed for specific disability-related needs, or are they general differentiation for everyone? All right, so when you think about the teachers in your building, are we thinking specifically about the needs of the students that we have that we know exist? Or are we thinking about general differentiation strategies that might be great for everyone? All right, so we can keep this as a personal reflection, or you can feel free to use the chat to share whatever feels right for you. But I want you to ground yourself in your own context when we think through these conditions, what's currently happening, and then maybe what changes would need to be made. All right, another question. In your school, when co-planning happens, how often is the conversation focused on student needs and instructional responses versus logistics like pacing or materials? All right. So what are we listening for? So another resource that I would like to share is an example of a co-planning agenda template. So we've talked about the importance of collaborative planning structures, and I want to show you what that can actually look like in practice. So this is an example of a co-planning agenda that teams can use to help structure their conversations. I'm going to drop this in the chat. I think you'll have to download a copy, but once you do, this is actually an editable PDF document. So take a look at that if you like or need something to kind of think through your own co-planning systems. But like I said, one challenge that we often see as schools is that co-planning time exists, but the conversation tends to focus on things like logistics or pacing. And even though those things matter, we want co-planning to actually strengthen specially designed instruction. And so the agenda helps because it allows you to intentionally guide teachers toward that instructional decision making. So at the beginning of the meeting, you'll see that teams start with session framing and logistics, any pre-work, but then moves right into planning for instruction. All right, so thinking through what are the key concepts students need to understand? How does this connect to the standards? Once that's clear, we want teachers to be asking themselves, what barriers might students experience in the lesson? What supports or instructional strategies will help with those barriers? And how might we adjust the lesson so all students can access the learning? All right, I see that you all need access. Give me one moment and we will open that up for you. Sorry about that. Um, we'll also send a copy out in our follow-up email, so you'll definitely be able to access it. But I will, Sarah, will you let me know if you're able to open access on that document? All right, Sarah says should work now, so give it another shot. But like I said, we will be sending a copy of this out. And we do have actually a whole co-planning toolkit on our website. And so maybe we can share that as well. We have a lot of different templates and vision making things for having strong collaborative planning through school. So we also love to share that with you. All right. That's condition 2. All right, jumping back in to our third condition. So the third condition moves us into how teachers are supported to design instruction. All right, so do teachers have the knowledge, strategies, and support needed to design effective SDI? Or do they need additional knowledge or support to implement it well? And when we're thinking about that as leaders, how are we providing that to our teachers? All right. So leaders should be asking questions like, how are teachers supported in learning effective SDI practices? How are instructional expectations for SDI communicated across the school? All right. So when this condition is strong, we see things like educators using shared instructional strategies to address common barriers. We see that schools have observational tools and actually give coaching feedback to support the implementation of SDI. Educators can explain why specific strategies are used to support students with disabilities, and instructional supports are embedded within lessons rather than added after students struggle. All right, so we have to think, just like we teach students, they can't learn the skills all on their own. We also have to support our teachers in making sure that they have the knowledge to implement this effectively and consistently. That's what we're going for. All right. And I'll pause here just to see if there are any questions on any of the 3 conditions we've kind of talked about already. The slide deck has not been shared, but we can share after, and we'll also send out a recording. All right. So the 4th condition is all about data and responsiveness. So it's monitoring SDI for impact, all right? Because ultimately, the goal of SDI isn't just to implement strategies, it's to accelerate student progress. So when we think about the effectiveness of our SDI, leaders could ask themselves these questions. What data do teams regularly review to monitor student progress? What data are teachers collecting to monitor progress toward IEP goals? Also, how are instructional strategies adjusted when students are not making progress? All right, so in schools where this condition is strong, we see teachers regularly reviewing data, teams reviewing progress toward IEP goals, using aligned data sources. Instruction is being adjusted in response to student data, not just reviewing the data, but also using it to inform instruction. And we see teams identifying patterns across students to inform their instructional decisions. This is also where we see leaders use data to evaluate the effectiveness of SCI and guide next steps, which could be support through professional development or coaching of a teacher on their implementation. All right, and so just to take a step back, as we look across these conditions, there's a clear through line. It starts with really understanding student need, not just broadly, but specifically tied to disability-related learning needs. From there, teams collaborate on how to address those needs, and then that collaboration translates into instruction, which is what actually happens in the classroom. And then finally, we monitor for impact. Are students actually making progress? So, another poll coming soon. Now that we've walked through those four conditions, I want to bring it back to your own context. All right. So, which of these four conditions is strongest in your school today? All right, I'm going to launch this poll. So, which one do you feel like your teams are already making some momentum on? Progress is there. What do we think? Ooh. All right, I'm going to give more people time to answer. Take your time. Requires a little bit of thought. All right, take about 10 more seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll in 3, 2, and 1. All right, so we see some mixed results here. All right, so it looks like collaborative planning structures is one that is the strongest among our group today. But we see that the least strong is that instructional support and coherence, right? And so if you don't have someone in your building that knows about SDI or has the tools to help support teachers in implementing and monitoring SDI, that could definitely be hard to do. All right. And then also monitoring for impact. So yes, things are happening, but are we making sure that they are the right things? All right, so I like these results. I like these results. They're very telling. I have another poll for you now. All right, my next question is, what condition is the biggest challenge in your school? All right, so it might just look like the inverse of what we just saw, but which one needs the most support? All right, the numbers are, it's like watching the lottery balls spin a little bit. Powerball is what it's called. All right. Ooh. All right. I'm going to give everyone about 20 more seconds. All right, so the results are not quite the inverse. All right, so we see that instruction driven by student need is one of the larger challenges and monitoring for impact. And so I think, especially when we talk about students with disabilities, when we're talking about instruction driven by student need, the foundation of that is likely the IEP. And so if you all, not you all, but if people don't have strong IEPs that are actually usable documents, that's a good starting point. Are we actually adequately capturing the needs of students and the support and adaptations they need to thrive um, in the general education classroom? All right. And so very, very interesting, very interesting. Um, Nice to see that collaborative planning, is building momentum both in not being as much of a challenge, but also as we think about how we do optimize that time that teachers do have together and how we optimize having two or three teachers in classrooms even sometimes. So thank you all for sharing. All right, my friends. This was somewhat of a quick session, but I hope that it was impactful for you all. I really appreciate the opportunity to learn alongside you today, and I'd love to stay connected as we continue this conversation. So please feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. But I also want to say that oftentimes after sessions like these, leaders start asking themselves and thinking about how does this actually show up in our school? How does it live in our systems? How can our observation and feedback tools be better? And that is exactly the kind of work that we partner with schools and districts to do. So we provide in-person professional development on topics like SDI. If you'd like us to come to your school and literally teach your staff about SDI and what it can look like, we'd love to do that. We also do needs assessments and supporting planning, leadership coaching, professional learning communities, all types of things. And so our work is really focused on partnering with schools and districts to strengthen things like SDI. So if that's something you're thinking about, we'd love to connect and explore how we can support you all in that work. So feel free to send an email and we can get that conversation started. All right. And so thank you so much for your participation today. I do also have a quick survey. If you'd like to take a moment to complete it, I'll also drop this link in the chat if you prefer a click. But we appreciate you joining us today and look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you all so much. And if you do have any questions or want to chat more, feel free to hang back.
Hey Sarah, hi everybody. So sorry I missed it. I was hoping to catch the second half. I had another meeting, but I'll catch the replay, as they say, as I did the last ones. I appreciate this one and share it with people.
Great.
Awesome.
We look forward to hearing about how others are interacting with it. So feel free to
Yeah,
share.
yeah. No, I share the recordings, with people, but also share the information. So thanks. I know this one was geared towards more of the leaders, so I'll be sure to let folks know. So I hope you guys are good. Sorry, like I said, sorry I missed it live. I'll catch the replay. Have a good one.
Awesome. Yes, there were other SEI sessions prior to this one. So we did general kind of like what is SEI session, and we did one focused on planning SEI. So more teacher focused. Both of those are on our YouTube page. If you type in the Ability Challenge SDI on YouTube, you'll definitely be able to find it. Joanne, I see your question. Where would you typically see SDI in an IEP? That's a really great question. So it kind of lives throughout. I would say at the present level specifically through the goals that students have, but it kind of weaves a thread and it depends on your state. So for example, here in Nashville, where I live in Tennessee, our IEPs say, does this student require specially designed instruction? And then what is that? And so it gives a clear box into what is specially designed instruction, but that's new. That just came about in the last like year and a half or so, I'd say. So it kind of depends on your context and where you are. Great question. Interesting. I'd love to talk more if you'd like, Joanne. All right, I'm going to end our recording here, and you can catch us on YouTube.